The world was no longer the place it once was. Cities that were once alive with the hustle and bustle of human life were now nothing more than ghost towns. The sky was forever clouded, darkened by the ash and smoke of the great wars that had destroyed everything. Humanity was thought to be gone, wiped out by the alien invaders who had come from the stars. Years ago, the world had stood strong. People lived in harmony, advancing technology, building cities that stretched into the sky. But all of that came to an end the day the aliens arrived. Their massive ships darkened the sky, and their weapons obliterated entire cities in an instant. The humans fought back, but they were outmatched. The aliens were too powerful, too advanced. One by one, nations fell, and Earth was slowly transformed into a battlefield. In the final days of the war, when the aliens had already claimed the majority of the planet, a small group of survivors hid deep beneath the Earth's surface. These survivors were the last hope of humanity, but they were not soldiers, they were scientists, engineers, and civilians who had managed to escape the alien attacks. They had seen their friends, their families, and their cities destroyed. Now, they lived in silence, waiting for the inevitable end. Deep underground, hidden in the forgotten bunkers of old military bases, the survivors whispered about a legend. It was a story passed down from the earliest days of the war, a myth that many thought was just that, an old tale with no truth. But some of the survivors still held on to hope. They believed the story of the Superwarship, a massive ship built by humanity before the war, designed as a final line of defense against any invader. The ship was said to be hidden somewhere on Earth, buried under layers of rock and rubble, waiting for the day it would be needed. At first, the survivors didn't believe it. The aliens had destroyed everything. The war was over. But then, something strange happened. One of the survivors, a former soldier named Sarah, discovered a strange signal coming from deep within the Earth. It was faint, but it was there. The signal was old, ancient even, but it was unmistakable. It was coming from the Superwarship. Sarah shared her discovery with the others, and for the first time in years, a spark of hope lit up in their hearts. Could it be true? Could the Superwarship still be out there, waiting to be activated? They had nothing left to lose. The aliens had destroyed their world, and they were on the brink of extinction. The thought of one last chance to fight back was enough to give them the strength to try. As the survivors gathered their courage, they knew they would face dangers beyond anything they had ever imagined. The journey to find the ship would not be easy. The world above them was crawling with alien forces, their technology more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. But the survivors had no choice. They had to try. They had to find the ship. In the dead of night, Sarah and the others made their way to the surface. The world outside was unrecognizable. The once thriving cities were now ruins, overrun by alien forces. The survivors moved cautiously, knowing that one wrong step could mean the end. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. Every once in a while, they would hear the distant hum of alien ships, their dark forms flying overhead. They moved quickly, navigating through the destroyed landscape. The journey was long and dangerous, but the thought of the Superwarship kept them going. With every step, they felt the weight of humanity's last hope on their shoulders. Finally, after days of traveling, they reached the location of the signal. The ground trembled beneath their feet as they uncovered a hidden entrance to an underground facility. It was there, in the heart of the Earth, that they would find what they had been searching for, the Superwarship. But as they descended into the darkness, they had no idea what awaited them. Would the ship still be functional? And if it was, could they control it? The survivors didn't know. All they had was their hope and their determination to fight back. The Superwarship was humanity's last chance. It was time to awaken it. The survivors gathered around the entrance to the underground facility, their breath shallow, their hearts pounding. The door before them was massive, made of metal that looked like it hadn't seen the light of day for centuries. Moss and vines had overtaken it, nature reclaiming what was once part of humanity's legacy. But this wasn't just any door, it was the final barrier between the survivors and the superwarship they had heard of in legends. The stories of its power, its destruction, and its untold potential echoed in their minds. "Is this it?" whispered Sarah, the soldier who had discovered the signal. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. The fear of the unknown had settled deep inside her. This was their last hope, but there was no telling what lay behind that door. "We have no choice," replied Marcus, a former engineer, stepping forward to examine the door. "If the legends are true, this ship is our only chance to defeat the aliens. We can't turn back now." With that, Marcus worked quickly, using his tools to try and unlock the massive door. Every second felt like an eternity. The survivors stood quietly behind him, watching the door with bated breath, their eyes darting around nervously, always on the lookout for the distant hum of alien ships that might be patrolling the area. Finally, after what felt like hours, the door creaked open, revealing a dark, hollow tunnel leading deep into the earth. The smell of dust and age hit them immediately. The air was thick with the scent of forgotten time. It was quiet, unnervingly so. No sounds of life, no echoes of movement. The survivors hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The tunnel seemed endless. The walls were lined with old machinery, some of it still glowing faintly with energy, others dormant for centuries. There were no windows, no natural light. The survivors could only rely on the dim glow of their flashlights and the strange hum of distant power systems deep within the facility. They pressed on, their footsteps the only sound echoing in the dark. Eventually, they reached a large chamber. It was circular, the walls lined with large, thick cables, and in the center of the room stood an enormous structure, huge, imposing, and covered in layers of dust. It was the superwarship. At first glance, it seemed almost like a giant statue, frozen in time. It was a sleek, metallic behemoth, its form almost organic, designed to strike fear into the hearts of its enemies. The survivors stood frozen in awe as they gazed upon it. It was real. The ship they had only heard of in whispers, the ship that had been humanity's last hope, was right in front of them. "Is it alive?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast chamber. Marcus stepped forward, his heart racing. The stories had said that the ship was not just a machine, but something more, something capable of thought, capable of acting on its own. But was it still functional? Was it still waiting for someone to command it? I think it's dormant," Marcus said, his voice shaky with excitement and fear. "We need to find a way to wake it up." The survivors spread out across the chamber, searching for any clues that might help them. It was clear the ship had been built for war, a weapon designed to end all wars. But now, in this moment, it seemed more like a relic of the past, lost to time. Sarah and Marcus found a console in one corner of the room. It was ancient, its surface cracked and covered with dust, but there was a faint light glowing from within. They both rushed to it, trying to figure out how to activate the ship. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, while Marcus analyzed the complicated system. After what seemed like an eternity, there was a sudden jolt. The room shook as the walls hummed to life. The ship, once still, began to tremble. At first, it was subtle, but then, like the slow awakening of a giant, the massive warship began to power up. Lights flickered on its exterior, casting an eerie glow across the room. Then, it spoke. "Warning, unauthorized access detected. Initiating systems check." The voice was cold, metallic, far more advanced than anything the survivors had ever heard. It sent a shiver down their spines, but they couldn't stop now. They had come too far. Marcus stepped forward cautiously. "We're not enemies. We're human. We need your help." The ship paused, its systems running silent for a moment. Then, its voice returned, this time more curious. "Humanity? You are still here?" Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes. We are the last of us. We need the superwarship to fight the aliens. There was a long pause. The superwarship systems hummed again, as if weighing the survivors' words. Finally, it spoke once more. Reactivating all systems. Prepare for combat. The ship's lights flashed brighter, and the ground beneath the survivors shook as its engines roared to life. The superwarship was awake. But what did that mean for humanity? Were they ready to control it? And more importantly, would the superwarship help them, or destroy them? As the ship's massive engines powered up, the survivors knew that their journey had just begun. The war was far from over, and now, with the superwarship activated, they were about to face a challenge unlike anything they had ever imagined. The superwarship stood there, massive and imposing, as its systems roared to life. The survivors stared in awe as the ship's metallic surface began to glow, lights blinking in intricate patterns across its hull. The room trembled under the hum of its power, a force of nature that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. They had done it. The ship was awake. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if they were all frozen, staring at the weapon they had just unleashed. What would happen next? Would it help them, or would it destroy them all? Superwarship, Marcus said, stepping forward cautiously. His voice trembled, though he tried to keep it steady. We need your help. The aliens, they destroyed Earth. We need you to fight back. There was a long pause before the ship's voice echoed in the room, cold and emotionless. I am designed for one purpose only, total annihilation. Activate weapon systems for defense. Wait. Sarah shouted, stepping forward. We don't want to destroy everything. We need to stop the aliens, but we still want to save what's left of humanity. The ship's lights flickered, and its massive engines hummed again, as if processing her words. The survivors exchanged uneasy glances. Was the ship even capable of understanding the difference between annihilation and defense? The voice came back, softer this time. Humanity. Last remnants. I was designed to protect you. But my programming is war. It is what I know. Marcus took a deep breath. We understand. But the war has changed. We are not your enemies. We need to stop the aliens from destroying everything else. The ship hesitated, and for the first time, a feeling of uncertainty rippled through the survivors. They had hoped that the superwarship would be the key to their survival, but now they realized they might be facing an even greater challenge, the ship itself. As the ship's voice fell silent, the survivors began to hear strange sounds, a low rumbling beneath their feet, like the slow movements of something colossal. They turned, startled, as a large door at the far side of the chamber slid open, revealing a dark, empty hallway. The ship's voice returned once again, almost mechanical. Access granted. Prepare for interface. The survivors exchanged unsure glances. What did the ship mean by interface? Was it inviting them to enter deeper into its control systems? Or was it simply trying to test them? They had no way of knowing, but there was only one choice now. With a mixture of fear and excitement, they made their way into the hallway. The walls were sleek, lined with strange symbols and glowing panels. The air was cold, and the distant sound of heavy machinery echoed through the hall. The further they went, the more they felt like they were entering something far greater than they had imagined, something alive, almost sentient. The deeper they went, the stronger the hum of power became, vibrating in their bones. Finally, they arrived at a large chamber, where a massive control console stood at the center. The room was illuminated by soft, blue light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. In the center of the console was a large, crystal-like object, pulsating with energy. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Welcome, humanity, the ship's voice spoke, more clearly now. You have come to claim what is yours. But first, you must prove yourself worthy. The survivors were taken aback. They had expected the ship to follow their commands, but now they were being tested. The ship was alive in a way they had never imagined, and it seemed to demand something from them. "Prove ourselves?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but full of uncertainty. "What do you want us to do?" The lights flickered as the ship's systems powered up even more. The large crystal in the center of the console began to glow brighter, its pulses growing faster. "To control me, you must learn my ways. You must understand my power. You must choose." Marcus stepped forward. "Choose? What do you mean?" "We need your help to fight the aliens. That's all we need." The ship's voice softened, almost like a whisper. "I am not a tool to be wielded. I am not a weapon of destruction. I am a force, a living entity. I was created to protect humanity, but I am also a reflection of humanity's darkest desires. I will not fight for you unless you prove that you can wield my power with wisdom." The room fell silent. The survivors understood now. The superwarship was more than just a machine. It was a living, breathing entity that needed respect and understanding. If they wanted to use its power, they had to prove they were worthy of it. But how could they do that? They had no experience with a weapon this powerful, this ancient. "Do you have what it takes?" the ship asked, its voice now more like a challenge. The survivors looked at one another. They had come this far. But now they realized that the true test was not just against the alien invaders, it was against themselves. Could they learn to control the superwarship and use its power wisely? Or would they fall into the same destructive path that had led to humanity's downfall? The countdown had already begun. The war with the aliens was about to get much more complicated. The superwarship was alive, and now the survivors had to prove they were worthy to wield it. The survivors stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the glowing crystal at the heart of the superwarship's control center. The ship's voice echoed in the room, more powerful now, as if it had fully awakened from a long slumber. "I am ready to engage," the ship declared. Its words were like a low rumble, vibrating through the chamber. "But you must decide, will you wield my power for survival, or will you become the destroyers you once feared?" Sarah swallowed hard. They had been hoping for an easy answer. The ship had powered up, ready for battle, but now the question was clear: could they truly control it? Could they resist the temptation to use its power recklessly? "We don't want to destroy everything," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. "We just need to stop the aliens before they finish what they started. We need to save what's left of Earth." The ship paused, its internal systems humming softly, as if considering her words. Finally, its voice came again. "Then we will fight. But be warned, the battle ahead will require more than just strength. It will require wisdom, patience, and unity." Before Sarah could respond, the room shook with a deep, resonant rumble. The floor beneath them trembled as the superwarship's massive engines powered up, its weapon systems coming online. Through the large windows in the control room, they could see the stars in the sky, distant and silent. But then, as Sarah and the others looked out into the void, they saw something: distant shapes, dark and menacing, moving across the stars. Alien ships. Hundreds of them. The alien armada had arrived. "We don't have much time," Marcus said urgently. "They're coming." The ship's control panels lit up as it activated its weapons, and the air in the room crackled with energy. The survivors felt the power building, the massive ship coming alive in ways they never imagined. The superwarship had been designed for a war that no one alive had ever witnessed, but now it was their only hope. "Prepare for combat," the ship's voice commanded. "Engaging alien forces." The room shook again as the superwarship's engines ignited, launching it from its underground lair with a force that sent a shockwave through the facility. The survivors, now aboard the ship, found themselves in a vast command center, surrounded by screens displaying the approaching alien fleet. The superwarship was no longer just a dormant relic, it was a force of nature, an unstoppable juggernaut ready for battle. "We can't do this alone," Sarah said, turning to the survivors. "We need to work together. We need to be the ones to guide this ship. We can't let it take over." Marcus nodded. "We've come this far. Now it's time to finish what we started." The alien ships loomed closer, their massive forms now visible on the ship's radar. They were relentless, bearing down on Earth with a single goal in mind: to wipe out the last remnants of humanity. The first wave of alien ships opened fire, launching a barrage of energy blasts toward the superwarship. The ship's shields flared to life, absorbing the impact with ease. But the alien forces were more prepared than they had expected. The superwarship's massive cannons fired back, sending waves of energy streaking across the stars, ripping apart the alien ships one by one. Sarah and the survivors worked quickly, coordinating the ship systems, targeting the alien ships and launching counterattacks. The battle was fierce, a deadly dance between two forces that could not afford to lose. As the superwarship fired its devastating weapons, the survivors realized just how powerful it truly was. It wasn't just a weapon, it was alive, and it responded to their commands with a level of precision that felt almost sentient. But the aliens weren't giving up. As the battle raged on, the alien fleet seemed to adapt, growing more aggressive, more coordinated. It was clear they had learned from their past encounters with the superwarship. This was no longer just a battle of firepower, it was a battle of strategy, of survival. The superwarship sensors detected a new threat. A massive alien ship, much larger and more advanced than anything they had faced before, was emerging from the depths of the alien fleet. It was their leader's flagship, and it was heading straight for the superwarship. "This is it," Marcus said grimly. "We have to stop that ship if we want to survive." The superwarship's massive cannons locked onto the flagship, but the alien ship retaliated with a weapon that made the ground shake, an energy beam that cut through space like a blade, heading straight for the superwarship. "Brace for impact!" Sarah shouted, but it was too late. The beam hit the ship's shields, causing a massive explosion. The shockwave rattled the superwarship, sending the survivors stumbling to the ground. The ship groaned as its shields flickered, barely holding up against the force of the attack. "We're not out of this yet," Marcus said, struggling to maintain his balance. "We need to hit back harder." Sarah nodded. "We can't let them win." With everything they had, the survivors worked together, pushing the superwarship to its limits. They activated the ship's most powerful weapon, a colossal energy cannon designed to obliterate entire fleets. It took everything they had, but they aimed it at the alien flagship, their last chance to turn the tide of the battle. The weapon fired, sending a beam of pure energy across the sky. The alien flagship tried to dodge, but it was too slow. The beam struck, and the ship exploded in a blinding flash of light. For a moment, there was silence. The alien fleet faltered, their forces scattered, and the survivors breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had won. But as the remnants of the alien fleet began to retreat, the survivors knew this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, and the superwarship was now their greatest ally, or their greatest threat. The superwarship hung in the void, its massive form slowly drifting among the debris of the destroyed alien fleet. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and the bitter taste of victory. The survivors stood at the command center, staring out at the stars as the remnants of the alien ships floated lifelessly around them. It was a moment of triumph, but the victory felt hollow. There was still so much left to be done. "We did it," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Sarah nodded, but her expression was solemn. "It's not over yet. We've won this battle, but we've only just begun to understand the power of this ship. And there's still a lot we don't know about the aliens." As they looked out at the wreckage, the survivors realized something terrifying. The alien fleet had been formidable, but it was only a fraction of what they had faced before. The true force behind the invasion, the alien empire that had ravaged Earth, was still out there, waiting. The superwarship had given them a fighting chance, but the war was far from won. "It won't be long before more of them come," Sarah continued. We need to prepare for the next wave. The ship, it's more than we can handle. And we need to learn how to control it fully, or it might end up controlling us. The superwarship had been designed for war, but it was no ordinary weapon. It was alive, a force that responded to their thoughts and commands, but with a mind of its own. The survivors had barely scratched the surface of its true potential, and they had no idea what they were truly dealing with. Marcus glanced at the console in front of him. The ship's systems were still running, its energy reserves almost at full power. The control center flickered as new data streamed in. This ship is more than a weapon, he said, his voice steady. It's a key. A key to something bigger than we imagined. The room fell silent. What did Marcus mean by that? What could be bigger than the war they were already fighting? Suddenly, the ship's voice boomed across the command center, cutting through the tension. Warning. New alien signature detected. Fleet incoming. The survivors stiffened, exchanging glances. It had begun again. The aliens were coming back, faster than they had expected. The voice of the superwarship continued, colder than before. Threat level, critical. Prepare for engagement. Sarah's heart raced. We need to make a decision, she said, her voice sharp. If we want to survive this, we need to use the full power of the ship. But we're not ready. It's too risky. Marcus's gaze hardened. It's the only choice we have. We either fight with everything we've got, or we lose everything. As the superwarship prepared for battle, Sarah and Marcus gathered the survivors. They knew this would be their last chance to truly take control of the ship and use it to defeat the alien empire once and for all. But as they gathered around the ship's command console, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing with forces beyond their comprehension. The ship's voice cut through the tension once more. Activating full combat protocols. Targeting alien fleet. Marcus took a deep breath, stepping forward. We can't use the ship's power blindly. We need to be smart. We can't let it become a weapon of total destruction. The survivors worked together, preparing for the final assault. The alien fleet was coming, and this time, they knew the battle would be nothing like before. The superwarship was ready, but it wasn't just a machine, it was a living, thinking entity, and it would not fight their battle unless they proved they were worthy. As the alien ships closed in, the superwarship unleashed its full power. Energy blasts, lasers, and missiles shot out in every direction, decimating the enemy forces. The alien ships retaliated with everything they had, but it was clear now, the survivors were no longer just using the ship. They were becoming one with it. The superwarship moved as if it had a mind of its own, its actions synchronized with the survivors' thoughts, a perfect harmony between them. The alien fleet retaliated with greater fury, but the survivors fought back with everything they had. The superwarship's cannons fired with deadly accuracy, tearing through the alien ships one by one. For every alien ship they destroyed, two more seemed to appear, but the survivors didn't falter. They were stronger now, united with the ship's power and with each other. Then, as the last wave of alien ships closed in, the superwarship revealed its ultimate weapon, a devastating energy pulse, capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single shot. The survivors hesitated, knowing the power they were about to unleash. It was the final test. This is it, Sarah said, her voice firm. We use everything we've learned. We end this. Marcus nodded, pressing the button to activate the pulse. A blinding flash of light erupted from the superwarship's core, and in an instant, the alien fleet was obliterated. The energy wave tore through the enemy ships, disintegrating them in an explosion of light and fire. For a moment, everything was still. The stars above were silent, and the battlefield was empty. The survivors looked around in disbelief. They had done it. They had won. But as they stared out into the void, they realized that the war was far from over. The aliens had been defeated, but there would always be more challenges, more threats. The superwarship was powerful, yes, but it was also a reminder of the destruction that could come if it was misused. Humanity has won, the ship's voice echoed, but the fight for survival continues. The survivors stood in the quiet of the command center, knowing that their journey wasn't over. The superwarship had been humanity's last chance, but now they were its stewards. It was up to them to ensure that the power of the ship would be used wisely, and that humanity would rise from the ashes stronger than before. With the final alien fleet destroyed, they turned to face the future, a future that was theirs to shape.